This film opened with Natalie Portman's character of Lena attempting to describe what had happened to her inside this still inexplicable anomaly known as the Shimmer. And that struggle to describe what she saw, what it meant, and why it was important, that struggle, well, I now feel myself as I attempt to review this film, because there was so much inside of Annihilation, so many different levels on which it played. But instead of turning me off to the film, those multiple, complex, sometimes confounding levels were the very elements that actually drew me in, making the film incredibly satisfying for me. One of those levels was the very classy, gorgeous, and unique visual spectacle, one in which I saw Alex Garland as a director very impressively crafting and presenting one captivating visual after another, always handling what really could have come off as an absurd, if not wholly silly, Willy Wonka color palette in very intelligent ways. His lighting and color grading just somehow made them feel believable and familiar, while also remaining wholly other. There was this moment earlier on in the film where the director chose to focus in on this glass of water, and the way that that liquid bent and skewed the world behind it, that ended up becoming one of this film's primary visual motifs as we were taken into the Shimmer. A place that bent, skewed, warped, and transformed reality. There was too within the film this beautiful visual progression that started off in these very straight, stiff, and stifled environments and then transitioned into a place as vibrant and colorful as a rainbow. Also on the visual level, Garland did a fantastic job handling the action beats, clearly displaying a level of care and intention in his cinematography and editing so rarely found in big films these days. Another level on which this film worked for me was the emotional level, and it did so not necessarily by presenting something foreign and unique like the visuals, but actually by presenting emotional beats and relational dynamics that we'd seen time and again play out in other stories. A turbulent marriage or an eclectic teen. Confusion, wonder, shock, and terror over undeniably confusing, wondrous, shocking, and terrifying things. And integral to those emotions was the ensemble assembled for this film. Each cast member bringing a different and in some way relatable perspective and emotional response to the story and the insane things that happened in it. Save one or two generic cookie-cutter moments like the classic the team meeting up, cracking jokes, and expositing why they're there, nearly every other interaction between those different characters just felt very real and very engaging. And with each of those familiar emotional beats, we the audience were allowed to relate to, identify with, and be drawn into the other levels, those being the narrative and thematic. Levels that definitely demanded a lot more from us, though I would contend demanded it in some extremely enticing and engaging ways. Narratively, I could tell by looking at this film's structure that it was based upon a book, but instead of that being a negative aspect, I actually found it to be quite a positive one. I found it extremely compelling that we, through these flash-forward sequences, were actually given this pseudo-narration, this type of third-person omniscient perspective that was able to comment on what had happened earlier in the story, as well as give us these key insights at very specific moments that would alter our perception of the characters and their journeys in very exciting and compelling ways. I loved, too, the pace of this film and just its ability to twist and to turn in these very dynamic and surprising ways that I'm sure larger franchise films with known sequels surely must envy. There was always this feeling that anything could happen and to anyone. Now, when it comes to the thematic level of Annihilation, I could easily pontificate for an hour and still barely have scratched the surface of all the things that this film explored and the specific ways in which it explored it. But alas, we don't have time for that, nor do I actually want to spoil everything for you. Even so, I found it and continue to find it so fascinating thinking about so many of the elements within this film. Like the lighthouse, a structure that is both able to guide one home as well as warn one to stay away. I love too thinking about each of the characters and their specific sins and how those played out in each of their journeys and their ultimate fates. I love too thinking about the intelligence or force or whatever you want to call it that created this anomaly, and contemplating what it was really doing and why it was really doing it. And I love too parsing through all the clues that this film gave us through the human characters and exactly what that intelligence or force did to them and why it actually made sense for each of them specifically. I love reading into a line like, "It looks like a wedding," which is how one of the characters described what they saw within the Shimmer, and just how that perfectly falls in line with what I saw in that place throughout the film. Two species, two entities, two beings, two forces, which were once separate, being made one. Now, I've heard a number of people express frustration over this film's ending and just its extreme ambiguity, and while I would never deny the validity of people's feelings about a film, that was not how I felt about this film at all walking out. I personally did think that the film gave me just enough to come up with some kind of satisfying conclusion about what the film meant and why it concluded the way that it did. And for all these reasons, I will give the film a 4 out of 5 and a heart. I would still love to know what you guys thought of the film, though, so definitely comment below and let me know. And I am curious, is there any film, especially in the sci-fi genre, that a lot of people just find very confounding, but you find personally very satisfying? I would love to hear about it. Finally, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.